All right, we're ready to go.
Good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And Ashley, if you do the roll call for me, please.
Sure. Chair Tom Farrell,
Here.
David Smith,
Here.
Mo Goyle,
Here.
Ronald Hasso,
Here.
and Tommy said that Ryan was about to be joining us as well as Jeff.
Yes.
Great.
So we'll continue. Okay, not to keep everybody waiting, but so do we have any public comments from anybody that on items that are not on the agenda? And I notice we have a couple of people from that are on here. I don't see any raised hands. Not that I can ever see them anyway, but
No, at this time I don't see any. If you're joining us at the bottom of your screen, depending on if you're on a phone or a computer, there should either be 3 little dots and you can click to raise your hand, or near the participants section. But at this time, Tom, no, we don't have any.
right. Okay. We're going to go ahead and table item number 2, since I think we all just got the minutes from the 6th. So we'll just table that for right now.
I'll mention for anyone who's here joining, we did just get the packet to work for a few other documents that weren't showing up earlier. So if you reopen your packet, every document should be live now. The minutes didn't quite make it in there, but we'll cover those next month.
Great. And item number 3, we'll do the same thing. We'll go ahead and table that. Item number 4 is a working session on the Bee Cave Road Subcommittee, including discussions on front, rear, and side setbacks, screen belts, impervious cover, height restrictions, and other concerns on individual commercial properties. We have, I've got one thing I'm going to bring up. We've got, Brooke did a red line on some of our discussion from last meeting, which I think is great. And Mo and Ronald and David, do y'all have those yet? You got them? Good.
Yeah.
Got that.
Yeah. Were these the ones sent out today?
They were sent out today.
Yeah, I have them. I'm just looking at the email right now.
Right. We just had a technical problem at City Hall, and we just got those in. Before we go over that, there's one thing that I thought about that we did not cover on Bee Cave Road, and that is our sign ordinance. And I'd like to kind of discuss that just a little bit. Currently, our sign ordinance, almost every business we have wants to have an increase in sign ordinance, in our sign sizes on that. Ashley, I don't think Carrie is on here, is she?
Yes, I'm here, Tom.
Oh, Carrie, could you pull up the sign ordinance and kind of brief us on that for a second, if you don't mind?
Sure. Give me just a moment to get it in front of me.
You remember today I said there were 2 things I wanted to talk to you about? And
This is that one that you forgot to talk to me about?
That's correct.
So I could be prepared.
That's right. Well, you're always prepared, Carrie. So, no.
Oh, I do my best. Okay, give me just a moment. I mean, we do have several different categories of signs while I'm getting this in front of me. Each one has a little bit different parameters placed on it.
I'm not as, frankly, I'm not as concerned about the marquee signs as for a project as I am for the individual signs that go on these buildings.
When you say a marquee sign, what does that mean to you? Are you talking like the marquee, like construction signs for when they're under project, or what are you? what are you describing?
Like for instance, Mira Vista has a signage for the whole, they put all of their businesses on one sign.
Okay,
Uh,
I think that's listed in our code as monument signs.
Monument, that's,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, so here we are. We do allow monument signs. We have restrictions on illumination. The illumination restrictions are really out of date. Nobody's using neon glass illumination in a monument sign at this point. It's all LED. Let's see here. They must be at least 10 feet from the boundary line of the property. So that's pretty far back when you consider, we've got text dot right of way, and then your property line, and then you're supposed to be 10 feet behind that. And then there are restrictions on the amount of square footage, and it relates to the amount of linear feet. So properties with less than 100 linear feet of right of way, their signs cannot exceed 24 square feet. This is just for monument signs.
Right.
And then for properties with more than 100 linear feet of right of way, theirs cannot exceed 48 square feet. There's a height limit of 8 feet, cannot exceed 8 feet in height. That's the meat and potatoes on monument signs. Then we have building mounted signs. So that's what you see when you're looking at Endeavor, for instance, and you see that compass sign. That those are the building mounted signs that are usually up on the top of the building. And again, we've got some kind of outdated light requirements, neon glass tubing, certain millimeters in size. It's just not relevant anymore. And then we've got letter height restrictions. So one horizontal line of lettering may not exceed 24 inches with no more than 4 square feet of total surface area. 2 horizontal lines of lettering not to exceed 30 inches with no more than 30-inch height logos. And when I get there, this is the main thing that I get variances for.
Right.
And they tend to be granted just because of visibility. And because of that, I think that if y'all are looking to make some changes, this would be pretty low hanging fruit, just because of the number of these that get approved. I think our code might not be matching what the community desire may be. Move down here to secondary signs. There are kind of 3 categories of those: awning signs, projecting signs, and wayfinding signs. I have not had an awning or projecting sign since I have been here. Wayfinding signs does come up.
Well, how do we classify wayfinds?
Well, it sure would be helpful if we had a definition.
Yeah, I couldn't remember that we ever had one.
We do not.
Okay.
I don't, but let me scroll back up here. I don't believe we have a definition for those.
And given that, can you give an example of a wave sign that we've approved? If you can think of one.
I can't. All I can think is I have been approached recently by Austin I to discuss wayfinding signs. I would want to look at some other municipalities and see how they describe them, but I would think of it as signs on private property directing traffic particular ways. So exit here, parking there, etc.
Well, let's start with this. the 10-foot setback from the property line, basically on a lot of our properties, that's 30 feet back from the roadway.
Correct.
So, it seems to me that although I'm always reluctant on signs because you drive down Burnett Road, it's just one sign after the other. My feeling is that we should make that 10 feet back from the roadway, or 5 feet back from the property line, and just move that up. Because I think that's been one of the biggest hurdles that people have had that I know of. I know everybody that does a project files for a variance on that. Especially on the monument signs.
It certainly doesn't help to direct traffic, because you're frequently past the sign before you see it.
Okay. Since I reading the survey, I read the survey again this weekend, and our residents want more retail and restaurants on BK's Road. And you almost have to have a different signage ordinance on that. Now we can go into some detail on that, which I'm really not an expert on signs, so I really can't tell us what we should have on that. But one of the things that I would like to do is to just look at this and say, okay, we need to relook at our sign ordinance to bring it up to date and to make it more helpful to our businesses that would go on BK's Road. Just leave it that as a blanket deal, because I think obviously our ordinance on signs needs to be updated regardless, whether we do it or somebody that knows signs can do that.
And Tom, if I may, I think it's really important to get with legal on this, because the rules have changed quite a bit with how you can regulate signs.
Yeah.
And it has gone all the way to the Supreme Court, and it's pretty complicated. I've been going through it in my volunteer position for the city of Bastrop. And so if we could have someone who's got more expertise than I feel like I've got enough knowledge to say I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. As far as wording it,
yeah, I'm not
legally. So if y'all have some general ideas, perhaps we could get that to someone who's got some.
Well, I just, my personal opinion is this is going to require not only legal, but we have to have an expert in sign technology. Right now, the LED bright signs is something that I particularly am not fond of, but that's I know that's the coming thing. So I'd like to hear some of the other strike force members' opinion, but to me, I would like to just include a paragraph in there that we think the sign ordinance needs to be reviewed with the possibility of moving the signage closer to BK's Road and updating our code to 21st century, or at least 20th century. Let's just, we'll just go with 20th century first, and then maybe we can jump in and do the other. It's been 30 years since we've looked at that. I think our sign ordinance was last done in 2000, so it's 21 years old. And technology has advanced quite a bit since then. So I'd like to just hear from some of the other strike force members what y'all's opinion are. Y'all may know more about signage than I do. But
I don't know much about signs, but that sounds like a good recommendation because it seems like the current code is going to keep the sign much too far away to actually be useful or practical. And so I think that's a good recommendation to make, that we adjust it.
and the building signs is hopefully the ones we will see on these for the most part. And
Mhm.
again, our code specifically gives that to the neon tubing, and I don't even know that you can. I think everybody that's got neon tubing wants to put it in a museum somewhere because they don't really use that much anymore. Mo, what do you think?
It seems complicated.
It is.
And so, yeah, this is the area of, I mean, I think this gets into the meat of anything where you're doing sort of a citizen-run committee.
Yes.
Like, I'm sure it's going to be very easy for me to have an opinion that runs against a rule or a policy or a ruling, and or we could spend days or weeks coming up with, we think, what was probably a great idea, and then find out it's not allowed.
Yeah. And David, what you deal with some of this with your
Yeah.
clients?
Yeah, it's one of those things where from my standpoint, we could really get down into a lot of hypothetical weeds on this. And it's also, I think, like it's been pointed out, sign technology and signage technology, particularly from an illumination standpoint, is rapidly changing, et cetera. The one thing I would say in terms of signage illumination, I want to make sure it, is protective of and continues to be protective of residences in terms of, light pollution to adjoining neighborhoods. But, then again, I think we have to kind of be adaptable. I agree with the idea of, changing the or making the recommendation that they can be moved as close to the, the front right of way as the building is. I mean, it's kind of obviously a no-brainer, but I wouldn't want to see it necessarily as restrictive as City of Westlake Hills, because I know some businesses that have had kind of nightmare scenarios dealing with the city of Westlake Hills, including Sway. But I think we make a recommendation to basically for the city council to look at it and basically make sure it is consistent with current technologies.
All right. Mo, would you be okay with that if we make a general recommendation that they bring that this list needs to be updated? I'll just tell you that to current standards.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we heard with, I mean, if that many variances are being approved, why don't we just cut down on the future work by aligning with all those often approved variance requests?
Yeah. And the technology that they use on this, because again, our ordinance specifically deals with neon signs, and we just I don't think anybody's going to put one in there like that. They may still make neon, so I guess they do, but
you're the only one, Tom.
Yeah, probably.
Actually, ironically, Tom, that there, neon is kind of becoming, more of kind of a retro art form. And, I was mentioning Sway they had a really iconic neon lotus. That was their sign down on South First. They wanted to do something similar at their Bee Caves location, and the Bee Cave City, the Westlake location, Westlake City Council wouldn't let them do it there because of their sign ordinance, ironically enough. So, well,
the fact that most of our that we get so many variances on this, and the two things that brought this to my attention was I looked at the survey again, and I'm thinking, okay, and just from my memory that every developer that we have had has had an issue with our sign ordinance on that. So if everybody's in agreement on that, we'll just include that as part of our recommendation that they update and review the sign ordinance with the consideration of perhaps moving these forward and for updating the ordinance to reflect new technologies that they have on that. Size of the sign, again, 48 feet sounds like a lot, but I will tell you on a monument sign, if you can, of course y'all are younger, but if you're driving down BK's Road and you're trying to look at Mara Vista businesses and see one in there, I drove down the road and BK's and was trying to read that without trying to hold up traffic. And it was interesting, is all I can say. So that's something that I think that we'll just include that unless anybody objects. We'll include that as part of our recommendation on the BK Road part of that.
Hey, Tom, this is Ryan.
Hey, Ryan.
How are you? The only thing I wanted to add is I watched one of the city council meetings where they discussed increasing the size of the name on the side of the building. You know, a lot of times when a new building goes in, the main tenant likes to have their name on the side. And it did seem, I agree, that it did seem like the council tends to allow those. The only thing that they thankfully stuck to, I was having trouble reaching them during the meeting because they didn't know how it would affect the people. They couldn't figure out during the meeting exactly where it was and how it would affect the people whose homes face it, if any. And I would just say for all of us on Timberline, it gets very bright with signage that is lit on the other side of the street. I actually have to use blackout curtains in my bedroom because it's so bright from the buildings across BK's Road. And so, I mean, it probably doesn't have anything to do with this recommendation, but I would just say that I would not support allowing lit signs past business hours because they don't really serve, especially for office buildings, their only purpose is advertising at that point. It's not to get someone to it after business hours.
Right.
And for all of us who live there, it dramatically impacts the quality of life to have bright lights in your house.
And I think that's along with what David said, I think that I include that in our recommendation. They updated with a proviso that that the lighting is not causes a problem to our neighbors on that. I'll have to work on the wording of that, but that's, to me, this is going to be a 6-month endeavor to go through the sign ordinance, would be my guess. And when they do, all I think that we do, but Ryan, I would include that in, if we want to do a motion on this, to recommend that they update the sign ordinance, moving it forward with the proviso that the signage has to be not directed at our neighbors, and where the lighting on that signage doesn't cause a problem on that. You shouldn't have to have, no Rollingwood resident should have to have blackout curtains for their home. I mean, that's just, to me, that's a simple deal because there's too much technology there to do that. And I'm certainly not opposed to putting an additional provision that they either reduce the illumination or do away with illumination after hours, because that's most of them cut them off anyway. I hope. Should be. I think you're catching that from the buildings that they leave the lights on for the cleaners to come in and do
I
that.
think it's mostly, I think it's Mira Vista. It's there's a bank over there that is the worst offender. They're very, very bright. And I understand you have to have lights on in a bank at night, but that's the one that's the brightest by far.
Well, and we'll go into that a little further, but I'm just going to make I'd like to get a motion and a on that to where we just send them a recommendation that they update it while protecting our neighbors from light pollution, and I don't have a problem about for them to consider hours of operation and when they do that update on that too. So so could I get a motion on that, and we'll just move forward and give them something to work on for the next several meetings. So
Sure, so moved. This is
got
Ryan.
a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. David, was it your hand? No.
No, but I'll second it.
There we go. We have a second. Any other discussion? And I'll work that. We'll write that out, and I'll bring it back for our next meeting just to make sure everybody's approval of the wording that we do on that.
Yeah, and I'll kind of also echo some of that I said initially and that Ryan said. You know, it's in terms of, you know, really taking a look at technologies and light pollution, particularly towards residential neighborhoods, because that's one thing as I understand it about different lighting options, et cetera, that LED lights can actually kind of offer a little bit of relief in terms of directionality, but also intensity, et cetera. So I think that's one, you know, particularly signage, lit signage that's pointed towards potentially residential areas, either directly or indirectly. I think that's one thing to, you know, take a look at those technologies as the city council takes a look at the signage ordinance in the future, particularly illuminated signage.
Great. Okay, let's go ahead and call the vote on that. So if you're opposed, just raise your hand. And if I'm not seeing any hands up, so that motion passes and we're good to go there. The next item I would like to discuss is Brooke did I thought, a very good job of kind of redlining what our discussion was last time about some of the things we have. Ryan, have you had did you get a copy of this, of Brooke's memo?
I did see the version that was that Ashley sent around. I've skimmed it. I haven't looked at it closely, but I have skimmed it.
Great. I thought Brooke did as always, a marvelous job of doing this. The issue that, and she did send out some guidelines on the night dark skies initiative, because that was one thing that we had talked about last time about how to define dark skies initiative. That's a pretty, that would help Ryan on your issue about the illumination you're getting across from the bank when we did that. Wally, welcome.
Thank you. I forgot to bring this from my car.
So are there any comments on Brooke's analysis? Brooke cannot be at the meeting tonight, or this afternoon. So, but I thought she did a great job of doing this, and I'm appreciative of that. So I'll let everybody kind of take a look at this and see if anything jumps out. You know, we can always come back to it if we need to. let me, maybe some of y'all have some thoughts on this. How would the dark sky policy work with our illumination of our signs? There's going to be security lights at every business. And of course, they can be shaded so that they're downward and not shining into our neighborhood. But we do have some with our signage, because our road is kind of curvy, that's still going to have some impact on our neighbors. And Ryan, this may be where the hours of operation might be a resolution on that, or it may not be. I don't want to go back on the signage deal again, but if y'all have any thoughts on that, let me try to include those in what I'm going to draft up. And everybody's familiar with the Dark Skies initiative, aren't they? Or are you? Any questions on that? Let me just start with that. So we all know, I think I read the Mcdonald Observatory's program on that, and I thought that would be something that would be useful for us, both on a commercial and a residential lighting situation. So, David, do you got any thoughts on that?
Sorry, I was muted. I like dark skies, kind of lighting dark skies as a kind of a policy goal. The Mcdonald Observatory dark skies may be a little bit more rigid than we're looking for. I'm kind of where I am is, I think dark skies are kind of important to residences and light directionality. The fact of the matter is, along Bee Caves Road, TxDOT is going to require lighting along Bee Caves Road, and I'm going to be less concerned about lighting along and directly adjacent to Bee Caves Road, so long as it doesn't cause light pollution or doesn't cause light pollution that's going to adversely impact our residences.
Okay.
So I just haven't, I know a lot about the Mcdonald Observatory and the goals of it and everything else, as it applies to Mcdonald Observatory, West Texas, dark skies. I'm just not sure. I haven't looked at it closely enough to really figure out if it's a good fit for kind of what we're trying to do along the commercial corridor or not.
Amber, are you on here?
Amber is here. She's joining by phone, so she able to. There she goes.
Hi there. Yeah, my question was, I don't know if it's different, but I know in the hill country, like Fredericksburg, Llano, Wimberley, Wood Creek, they're all dark night skies. And I don't know if it's the same as the Mcdonald Observatory, but they've all adopted some dark night skies regulations, and maybe we could look at those to see if they were maybe more fitting to what the community would be trying to accomplish versus the Mcdonald Observatory.
I think she's got in here the dark skies lighting policies of the McDonald's Observatory or the state certified dark skies organizations. And the state actually has some guidelines on that. In fact, TxDOT has some also.
Yeah. Well, and I really like, Amber, thank you for that recommendation, because I think, when you look at a place like Fredericksburg that has a very active and robust commercial corridor along Main Street in Fredericksburg. I think it'd be helpful to look at, kind of what they're doing with lighting, et cetera, because you do have that active, vibrant Main Street there in Fredericksburg, but then, you do have residents that are just a block or two away as well. So that's a really good idea.
So we would add or other policies that meets the goal of dark skies.
There's Dripping Springs was the first one in Texas, and they've got, if you just go to cityofdrippingsprings.com, they've got a link right on their homepage called Night Sky. So they go with so there's different organizations like we touched on. They go with the International Dark Sky Association, and they have everybody's got a certification, and they have one for dark sky community. And I believe Dripping Springs is still certified under that, even though they've grown so much, and they have quite a lot of commercial activity now along their main thoroughfare. I mean, more than Bee Caves has, at least in the Rollingwood area. And they did it back in 2014, so it's been they were a lot less developed then, which might have just been foresight to get it included first. But it's sometimes viewed as a means, like we'd have to look at the details to see if it helped accomplish sort of the goals of what the survey, what the citizens want. I think it's a great, I think there's multiple certifications. I think that all of them serve a really good purpose to try to limit the light pollution.
So they're international certifications rather than just state certifications.
Dripping Springs says, was the first city in Texas to be designated an international dark sky community. And the group is International Dark Sky Association. At the time, they were the 6th one in the world. I think a lot more cities have gotten this designation from the International Dark Sky Association since 2014. I remember seeing it in the news when it came out back then, and I did a quick Google while we're on this call, and it popped right up. They've got a whole webpage dedicated to it, the City of Dripping Springs.
And then, so if I took out state out of that and just certified dark skies organizations, that would cover generally everything that we're looking at. Because I'm not sure I'm not sure the state has a certification for that. They have an office, and I don't want the state to form an office just to certify dark skies. I'm sure they've got somewhere else, but as long as it's for what we're doing right now, we're just going to recommend a dark skies policy, whether it be from the Mcdonald's or other state agencies or international agencies on that. So, I mean, as long as it's certified, I guess, of course,
Dark Sky is the organization that Fredericksburg.
Yeah.
All adheres.
Okay. Well, I think from our recommendation to the city, the dark skies policy is something that we are going to recommend. And then how they get to the certification part, because different organizations do that, but I think they're all generally coming up with the same type of policies on that. David, you said you were familiar with the Mcdonald's Observatory. Do they have, are they much more restrictive than, say, the other organizations, if you know that?
Well, it's, I know the policy and the purpose and the goals behind Mcdonald Observatory, and I've not compared it to, Dripping Springs, Fredericksburg, et cetera. So I don't want to, I don't want to guess, but the goals of the Mcdonald Observatory are basically to try to decrease light pollution in West Texas, kind of, originally original concept was so it didn't interfere with the telescopes and the Mcdonald Observatory. And so, what I don't know is, and Mo raised a good point about Dripping Springs, is, they've had a lot of growth along the 290 corridor, which is within the city limits. I don't know, how that commercial growth along 290 has jibed with their dark skies ordinance. But I think that's probably a little bit more of a parallel to our situation in Bee Caves Road than Mcdonald Observatory and what their goals are.
Okay. All right. As long as it's certified from a real organization.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean,
Yeah. I'm
I mean,
looking at they have I guess you have to do an annual report, and the most recent one was October. It was published in October of 2020, ending September 30th. This is the city.
Right.
It's a really nice report.
Yeah.
And so they have light readings at different spots, at 7 different spots in the city, and the updates on the ordinance and compliance and promotions. Anyway, but I'm assuming they did this report because it looks like annual report to IDA. So there's work involved, of course, but it looks like they do it right. This isn't just, it looks like it's a well-run thing. There's a Night Sky Texas program. So I can send the link.
So
to get back on track, I agree with the recommendation. I don't know if we need to do a motion.
Yeah, we can. There's a couple things before we get to that I'd like to look at on this. So one of the problems that we're hearing about is that we currently have light pollution coming into our residential areas. So this is going forward. I think we could do this. Are there any thoughts about how to incentivize existing buildings to adjust their lighting? We do have a lighting ordinance in Rollingwood that requires them to direct their lights down on commercial buildings, but it's still too bright, and we're getting light pollution over into our residential area. Any thoughts about how we might use some type of incentive for existing buildings? I'm okay with going forward, but I mean, if we still got buildings that are too bright, is anything that y'all can think of that we could put in here that might incentivize them to redo their lighting now? So Ryan, this directly affects you, so
Yeah, I mean, it would, but I don't know, is the answer to your question. I don't know what the city's legal abilities are to alter the circumstances of an approved lighting.
Yeah, I don't think we can go back and demand it, but I'm just thinking of a way to incentivize it. In fact, David, let me ask you, could this be a project of RCDC?
Potentially. I want to I think we need to discuss it with legal counsel and the board, because, whether or not it falls under, the auspices of economic development. I mean, certainly it'd be great for the residents, potentially, if we can incentivize or subsidize, some lighting change, identify some lighting issues and make some lighting changes. Whether or not that falls under the auspices and the mission of economic development or not, I would want to compare notes with our legal counsel and the other members.
Okay. I mean, fair, but
the only thing I can think of is allowing them to increase their signage during daylight or daytime hours in exchange for the dark skies sort of signage lighting at night. But I don't know if that's something we want, but that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, Ronald, that's kind of that's a good thought, and kind of along the lines I was thinking of as well, if there was some way to work with them to say, well, kind of how can we incentivize this, and I think that's something that to roll back to your question, Tom, I think RCDC could play a role in that, to the extent that we were able to identify some issues that of kind of more acute light pollution. And then, potentially as RCDC go to those, those businesses or those property owners and say to them something along the lines of, hey, this is kind of becoming an issue, is there a way we can talk about redesign and, where we work with you and work with the city to potentially allow some accommodations or some things you maybe do want in exchange for improving the light pollution situation.
So what if we just added another part of this of Brooks's deal and just said, and to add incentives for existing buildings to meet dark skies policies?
I think that sounds like a good recommendation
Yeah, because there may be some other incentives that
we're not thinking of.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, that I'm not there, but that would be a. So I'm going to add that to this recommendation we're making on Bee Cave Road. That we add that provision, that we add an incentive. We look at different incentives for existing buildings to meet dark skies policies on that. So, and if anybody objects to that or has any other comments, just let me know. But I'm going to put that in there on that.
Yeah, and I think and Tom, if you've mentioned this, I apologize, but I think, I think we ought to be embracing, we ought to be encouraging, dark skies policies. I might personally, because I think Mcdonald Observatory dark skies is a little bit, more onerous than we might want to go. And would people be comfortable if we just said, dark skies lighting policies adopted by other, other Central Texas communities and or by Central Texas communities and other state certified dark skies organizations?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Because I think that conceptually still covers the concepts included in the Mcdonald Observatory, kind of their goals and everything. But I want to, basically maintain, some flexibility to, for the city council to find and adopt a dark skies kind of codification that fits our community.
Okay, great.
I think that's good. And looking at what Mo sent over and a few of the other cities, it seems like the International Dark Sky Association is the main organization that everyone looks to, and they even have some model ordinances on their website.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ron. I think it's a really good recommendation. It's kind of like taking a quick look at it. It's kind of like it's getting to be kind of the lead organization for dark skies, kind of like, LEED is for energy efficiency and things of that nature.
Right. Okay. Well, I think any other comments or questions on Brooks's analysis?
Oh, one quick thing, and I think it's a typo, but at the very last, under 4B, she says requires placement of heritage trees with a tree or trees of same species and having the same total caliber. It should be caliper inches.
Yeah.
With a P.
Okay. All right. Okay. Do we have Do we have anybody on the line that's one of our citizens that's not on the task force that wants to make any comments on this? Do we have any hands up? Ashley, I don't see.
We do not have any hands raised at this time.
Okay, great. Okay, so with those changes, could we adopt Brooks' wording that we have on here?
This is Ryan, so moved.
So moved. Do we have a second? We need 1 second here, guys.
Second.
Yeah, we got a second. Thank you, Wally. Second, and any other discussion or questions? Not seeing any, so please raise your hand if you object. Otherwise, we just keep your hand down if you want to vote yes. And I don't see any hands raised. Ashley, do you? So we are adopting this. Very good. Okay, anything else on BK's Road that we want to kind of talk about? I think I'm not seeing any hands, so we'll move on. Item number 5, discussion and possible action regarding future meeting dates and topics. I want to go ahead and we'll have a meeting every Monday until we get this through from a meeting date standpoint. Are there any other topics that we want to try to make sure that I put on the agenda that anybody can think of? I think we've covered most of what we wanted to be able to write this. So not seeing any comments on that. Item number 6, discussion and possible action to approve a schedule for completion of the comprehensive plan. And I'm going to add something on this, and chapters to be included in the comprehensive plan. And Sean, are you on here?
I am. Yes. Sorry, I'm having an issue with my video.
No. Well, I can't help you with that. I can barely get mine to work. So why don't we go ahead, if you don't mind, and if you would take the lead on this, and let's go over, let's start with the chapters that we need to include, and then we'll go through what we're planning on doing with each one.
Sure. So these chapters, I think Ashley sent this out to you all earlier today. It's just kind of one page in an introduction that I think Bowie is working on right now. And it has a description of each of these different chapters. And these are typically chapters that you would see in a comprehensive plan. And that, something like these, you might have different chapter headings, might change the title of them or whatnot, but something like that needs to go into the comprehensive plan. And so those are, if you don't have them in front of you, I'll just say them all: vision and goals, community profile, current land use, future land use, parks and recreation, facilities and infrastructure, economic development, and mobility. Some of those you might want to change. Typically what you see in these chapters is a description of sort of the current state of affairs. And then you may see, following that, policies. And those are going to be, city council, ultimately policies that they adopt. So a lot of what you've been working on, for example, on the Bee Cave Road corridor, excuse me, that's going to find its way into the future land use chapter of the comprehensive plan. And then after the whole comprehensive plan is adopted, then the codification of all that will happen. So the land development code will have to be kind of modified to, get up to the same level of the comprehensive plan. So in general, Tom, that's kind of what the chapters are and sort of what they would include. I'll pause there.
Well, let me go through each one. Bowie is doing the vision and goals and the community profile because they've done that for their branding deal. So I was going to let them do that. The current land use you did on the original plan was submitted back last year on that. So we don't really need to bring that. Are you going to have to update that, or is that what you have is works for that?
Yeah, I don't think I'll have to update it too much.
Okay, that would be you guys. And then the future land use, you're going to do an analysis that we've gone through this, and we have worked on BK's Road, which we have the availability for. If you don't have that, Sean, I can get that for you. Everything that's happened with that. The survey I thought was very telling about what our residents wanted. So I think that we want to make sure that that's included in there, and you have that survey results and everything else on that. So this is for Sean. And then Parks and Recreation, what I had put in there and what I had proposed on there is using our master plan that was completed a couple years ago with two provisions that I asked that we look at. One was that we look at the acknowledge that there was an issue with our dog park. And there was one other thing that I had. And that the city look at opportunities that come up that would provide services to Rollingwood residents and financing for a park. So, and guys, if anybody wants to make a comment or jump in at any time, please do so.
Tom, this is Ryan.
Yes, sir.
I've thought a decent amount about the parks thing. I wasn't part of the parks, comprehensive plan. So I really don't know anything about it. I know there has been some criticism of the process. I don't know, because I wasn't part of it, whether I would agree with that criticism. So I really don't feel like I can take any stand at all, other than to say that I do feel confident that the city council would not want us to do a comprehensive parks plan as part of handing us this request to do a comprehensive plan for the city. I don't think they wanted us to redo that. I think if they had wanted us to redo that, they would have said so. Yeah. So I don't know that I actually wouldn't support making any new comments at all, other than just to say we determined that it was in our best interest not to revisit the work that had already been done. And to the extent that the city council is happy with the work that it's been done, that it should just simply go in. That essentially we're taking no position by incorporating the existing plan for the park, and we're simply opting out of interfering with the existing parks planning process. And if the parks committee or commission wants to take a stab at it, or the city council wants to, that's fine. But I think we should. I think that by incorporating it, we are opting out. We're saying this is not going to be part of our agenda. That the city council didn't ask for us to redo the parks plan, and we should just leave it as is. That's what I think.
Okay, that's generally what I had thought, and I was just going to make the comments on there that we received quite a bit of feedback on the dog park and the the commercial activities that possible there. But I'm perfectly happy to leave that as is, because I think whether it was done, how it was done, I participated in it when it was done, I guess, 3 years ago? Ashley, do you recall when the master plan was done for the park?
It was 2018.
It was.
Yep.
Yeah. And just leave it at that. Any other comments on that from anybody?
I concur with Ryan. It's okay. The park master plans circa 2018. I'm like Ryan. I'm in the boat where I didn't participate. So, but I know that it's you know, was before various city committees plus the city council on numerous occasions. So, you know, I think it'd be a mistake for us, especially without, especially since it wasn't kind of part of our charge to try to take replow those grounds.
Very good. Any other comments? Any of
So
our
Tom, if you need a motion, my motion would be that we incorporate the existing parks master plan simply because we understood it not to be part of our recommended agenda by the, that are part of our charge. That's right.
Yeah.
Hey,
I'm good.
Ryan, can I add 2 words to that?
Of course.
I would say basically we incorporate it by reference.
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh man, y'all.
The lawyers. It's the lawyers.
I know.
I just what I don't want to do is I mean, you know, I kind of want, you know, I don't want to create a bunch more paper by including the whole thing in our report when it's just as easy to incorporate it by reference.
I think, Sean, you probably would include the park master plan, not only by reference, but included in the document.
Yeah, we can definitely do that, and you know, include the whole plan as an appendix if you want, and you know, possibly, you know, have policies that reference exact policies that are already in there. That's up to the committee how they want to.
I'm not interested in putting in any policies. Just we'll reference it and include it in the document as an appendage, and just go with that.
And Tom, that was my understanding from some early conversations with the city council, is that they would really like to be able to have one document to hand to people to say, this is the plan for the future of the city. Again, I don't want to take too aggressive of a stance on the parks plan because I almost don't want to touch it, other than just to say, that's the placeholder that we're putting in there. If the city council wants to change it, that's fine. But we understood that not to be part of our charge, so it goes in as it is, unless the city council wants it otherwise.
Yeah. And I like the idea of basically incorporating by reference and including it as an appendix.
Yeah, it's got I think they want a document with everything in there, so we can do that. Okay, I'm good with that. And Ryan, I think you made a motion, didn't you?
Yes, that's my motion, that it, as David said, be incorporated by reference and appended to the comprehensive plan, and
Excellent.
that's it.
Okay, great. Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Do we have a second? Thank you, Ron. All right. Let's any comments or questions, or don't see any. So let's hold a vote. And again, just keep your hand down if you're in favor. And I don't see any hands up, so that passes. Okay, our facilities and infrastructure plan. That one's, we've got several different little programs in there that show our not only our capacity of and our limitations on water and wastewater, but we have the facilities plan. And again, those I would like to just reference, include by reference, and put those in the as appendages to the plan. Unless anybody has any objection, I think that's probably the best way to do that.
This is Ryan again. I agree that the city, my understanding, the city council was not asking us to revisit how and which options to choose in things like the city hall rebuilding and things like that. I think those that our input on those things goes into the vision and the goals, and in some ways into the future land use planning. but I don't think they intended us to rewrite reports that were already done. And I do think they intended us to include reports that were already done. So things like the drainage survey, things like the city hall analysis. I do not believe they intended us to rewrite any of those documents.
I agree. The only thing that I did in addition to that was there were questions about existing capacity, and we did do the studies on those. So we
Yes.
have,
We should add those. We should add those.
And I think they should go in there also on that. Okay. Economic development. Sean, if you'll kind of expand a little bit on what we're looking at there.
You know, a lot of the work that you guys did on kind of looking at the bond indebtedness and that sort of thing would go in here. Oftentimes cities put in here kind of how they're going to try and incentivize development on certain corridors. Could go into that area. And this is one of those chapters, I think, for you all, you may want to maybe delete or really totally modify.
Well, the one thing on incentivizing our redevelopment of BK's Road is the changes we're recommending on BK Road Subcommittee on that. And I want to make sure that we put those changes in that, because I think that's going to make a huge difference as to how much incentive we give for somebody to redevelop into something that is something that our citizens would like to see.
Yep.
On that.
This is Ryan, and I think it really depends on. I think this committee has done a lot of work on how we would envision the Bee Caves corridor, and I don't. Maybe that's what that section is for. Maybe that's the future land use section. I'm not sure, but it. Other than the work of the RCDC, I certainly didn't get the view from the citizens from our survey that there's a huge desire to subsidize any development. That that our incredibly in-demand space will develop or not develop based on market demands and not unlikely, other than again with the exception of RCDC, where unlikely to be the product of subsidies from our city.
I agree totally. In fact, I'd like to make sure that we put in there that one of the things I remember reading, I can't remember exactly where in the survey, but people want development and redevelopment to pay for itself. So that includes not only our BK Road development, but our single family development.
Yeah, so I'm not sure we even have an economic development section of it, unless it needs to cover things in our vision that are not already going to be covered in future land use.
Yeah, I think we would take the future land use and kind of reiterate what the changes, how they would affect the economic development if we go on that. But the fact that development and redevelopment has to pay for itself, I think, is something that's critically important to what we do. Because I remember that being pretty. Our residents responded overwhelmingly on that, and I feel the same way personally. So that's where I'd like to see it. Okay, we'll probably reiterate some of the future land use issues in the economic development section, Ryan. And I think what that does is just shows that we are incentivizing, i.e., by proposing future land uses that would incentivize redevelopment of BK's Road on that.
I agree. We are expanding in my understanding, expanding the ability for redevelopment in the changes that we proposed. But beyond that, I don't see us as providing, economic subsidies in any way.
No, just for the record, I'm totally opposed to that. I think that's ridiculous. With what we've done on BK's Road, I think that should be incentive enough on that. Mobility, Sean, you want to? We have several issues that came up in our surveys about what some of our residents want on that. That was a high topic, and I assume we would put that in the mobility section.
Yeah, this is one of those chapters where some communities will kind of fold in the elements of mobility into the future land use chapter. Kind of like what Ryan was describing with, economic development and that sort of thing, Bee Cave Road. But, some cities like to have mobility as a separate section, and that's, vehicular, pedestrian, bicycle, kind of all of that. It's really up to you how you want to deal with that.
I think that we got so many comments on the traffic issues, sidewalks, bicycle lanes, trails, that we do need to include the mobility section in our deal, because we got a lot of comments on that, and I think that would be I think that's important that we include that in our plan.
This could be where we talk about the heavy desire of a connectedness between the residential and commercial areas, and the desire to put in, I think David told us to write it as a hike and bike trail along Edge Grove. But the possibility of having some kind of connected trail on Delana Lane, the desire for wherever possible to have sidewalks in the back of the properties on the north side of the Bee Caves corridor. I think those are the type of things that people clearly want, is more connectedness, more walkability, possibly being able to ride a bike safely, working with TxDOT to perhaps make it easier to access the properties on the south side of Bee Caves Road from Rollingwood for pedestrians or bicyclists. Those are the kind of things that, again, I think we could put them in the future land use also, but if we want to separate the mountain mobility, that was, to me, a very significant portion of the comments, is that people wanted a connectedness.
I agree. And that's why I wanted to include it as a separate item, just because we got so many comments on that. And the safety issue goes in there also. There were quite a few comments about safety in our survey responses on our streets.
Yeah, and the desire to not increase traffic within the residential areas was right. Very heavy in the survey too. I wanted to there was one thing that you skipped, which was community profile, Tom.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I just wanted to make one comment on that. And I've talked to others, and it seems like most people agreed with this observation or this view, which is I was kind of turned off a little bit by the early draft of this section, which talked a lot about the financial prospects of the people who live in Rollingwood. I don't think that the incomes of the people who live in Rollingwood is particularly relevant to the vision for the community that we want. I was really turned off by those, and others were too. And so I was hoping that we could significantly de-emphasize the economics of the people living in Rollingwood. First of all, there's a lot of people living in Rollingwood who don't fit the same mold as most of the people who are now moving in, and I just didn't like it very much.
I think that's I agree with you, Ryan. I think that's probably something that it is what it is, and we want our one of the beauties of Rollingwood, I've always felt, is that we have a lot of different social economic groups in Rollingwood that get along together. So I couldn't agree more that that's not something that I would emphasize on that. And I'm not going to emphasize the financial part of that, because I think the financial part of that is something that the city council needs to figure out how to. We're going to tell them what the citizens want. We're going to tell them what, from a, the bond and the tax issues that we've worked on. It's their choices as to how we go forward on that. So, Sean, how about the implementation section? This is one that I had a lot of questions on, because we're going to file this report and we're going to make some recommendations for them to do, for instance, on the sign ordinance that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
That'd be looked at. But what else would we put on the implementation on that?
It's up to you how you want to format that, but some cities kind of look at it as just a very simple, almost like a spreadsheet of all of the major recommendations from each of the chapter, with an idea, an inkling of timing, short term, long term, middle term, or within the first year, or 3 to 5 years, etc. And you could also decide to have some discussion of the finances, kind of like maybe drawing upon what you were talking about in the future land use, some of the work that you guys looked at on bond financing and capacity. Some cities might choose to put that in this section.
I probably would not include that. Again, that goes to me, that goes to the city council as to how they want to implement this for the most part. I think we need to make some recommendations in regard to some revisions of existing ordinances and changes, like on BK's Road and on the residential side and on the sign ordinance and that sort of thing. But I wasn't planning on getting into a spreadsheet like long, short-term deal, because that's based on, for instance, our future land use. We can tell people what our citizens want and what we're willing to recommend as changes on BK's Road. The market is going to dictate when that occurs, and we don't want to tell any property owner that, we want you to move, we want you to change. We want to give people incentives to do it, but we won't. It would go against my nature to demand that they do that, or put a time limit on it from that standpoint. I don't think that's going to get us anywhere from anything. Wally, that's you we're talking about on that.
I know. I know.
So, but I hope we add enough incentives to where that would, that we get down to it to where it has to be a profitable deal for somebody to redevelop a piece of property on BK's Road. So that was the intent of what we're trying to do. So, okay, any other questions on that? Do we have any of our residents that are on here that want to comment on the elements of the plan? Is there any other part of this that we want to add or take away from this? Okay. That's easy. I would ask this, Sean, and I'm just going to ask you here from the standpoint of when you would, at our next meeting, I'm going to see that I can get the vision plan from Bowie and the community profile from Bowie. And you probably could get me the current land use section by our next meeting, couldn't you, Sean?
Yeah, I probably can.
Is it any of these others? And probably we could have, that'll take care of parks and recreation, the facilities plan, that we should have that done, the economic development portion of that, or any of the rest of these, the future land use, economic development, mobility, or implementation section. Could you have any of those at our next meeting?
Let me look at that, Tom. I can't commit to that right now.
Okay. All right. And I have, I've
You're
got
talking about
some,
this coming Monday, right? Or in a week?
yes. Well, a week, 7 days.
Yeah, less than 7 days by now, right?
No, you can work tonight. There's no problem with that. Okay. Any other comments or questions on elements that we have of the comprehensive plan? Ashley, if I'm going to reach out to Patty at Bowie, if you would also do that and tell her what I'm asking for, see if we can get the drafts on this so we could start working on the drafts of that.
Sure. Will do.
Right. Okay. Moving on. Public comments. Do we have any other public comments from any of our residents that would like to make any comments to our committee? Not seeing any. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Wally. We have a second?
Second.
We have a second. And again, I don't see any hands up, so that we are adjourned. Thank y'all all so much for your time.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.